Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Lauren. I know I'm a little late to this. We're already like halfway through January at this point, but I still really wanted to go through all of my favorite books that I read in 2025. Almost all of these are 5-star reads or very close to a 5-star read. I honestly give a lot of books 5 stars, and that doesn't necessarily mean they're perfect. I mean, I've yet to come across a perfect book, but these books are ones that I couldn't stop reading or I couldn't stop thinking about once I was finished. So I thought I would go through these books and try to convince you to read my favorite books. I'm also going to let you know exactly what kind of reader I think would enjoy each of these books, especially for the fiction. So yeah, I'm separating this into two main categories, fiction and nonfiction, starting with the fiction, and these are in no particular order. I definitely could not even rank these anyway because they're all so good. So let's get into it. I started out the year strong with Chain Gang All-Stars by Kwame Adjei-Brenyah. This is set in a world where inmates can opt to join a battle royale type tournament that's live streamed instead of either living out their life in prison or being sentenced to death. And I just absolutely love this book. I was hooked the entire time, all the way up to the last sentence. There's so many different ideas being explored in this book, like the prison industrial complex, our obsession with reality TV, and also our ability to just casually view horrific acts of violence. And then there's also being Black and queer in America, especially in the prison system. And the author also has footnotes at the end of each chapter that tie what's happening in the book to a real life event. So it really just reminds you that this is not some far off crazy dystopian idea. It's pretty darn close to reality. It's just so well written, and I really hope this author goes on to write more because I think this one is his debut, which is really impressive. I think you would really enjoy this book if you loved The Hunger Games, or if you like a book that can make you laugh and cry and want to scream all at the same time. I guess don't read this if you can't handle gore and death, but honestly, I think this is a really important read, and horrific deaths are happening every day in the Black community, so I don't think this is something we should just be averting our eyes from. Okay, next on the list is Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. I honestly don't even know how it took me this long to read this book. It is so good. It's a classic for a reason, and I think it would have been really interesting to have read this as a teenager. The way it's written is so easily digestible and accessible to a wide audience, and I really think anybody could read this book and get something out of it. This was written in the 90s but set in a dystopian 2024-2025 that's honestly not far off from our current climate. There are fires raging in California, there's food and water shortages, and violence and drug use are widespread. Our main character Lauren is forced to flee the relative safety of her home in search of a new safety and the freedom to start her own society. I just love this book so much, and I still need to get to the second in the series. It's definitely top of my TBR for 2026. I would say similar to the last one, if you love The Hunger Games, you should definitely read this, or just dystopian novels in general. And I'm not even gonna say don't read this because I truly think everyone should read this book. It definitely can get heavy at times, but it's so important and honestly has a really hopeful outlook on life despite all of the horrors going on, which is really inspirational. Okay, next I read To Be Taught If Fortunate by Becky Chambers. This is my third Becky Chambers book and honestly might be my favorite. It's a sci-fi novella about a team of astronauts who are on a mission to find planets that might be able to support human life. So kind of giving Interstellar vibes in that way. And it's basically written as a letter to future humans about their explorations and their discoveries, which I thought was a really unique and interesting format. And I also really loved the science elements of this one, like the way that the planets and alien life forms are described in such detail was so interesting to me. Also, Becky Chambers really knows how to write a character. This is such a short book and we have 4 different characters, but they're all so well developed and I really fell in love with all of them. I read a lot of depressing or intense books last year, so it was really nice to have this little bite-sized, uplifting, hopeful book in the middle of all of those other ones. You should definitely read this if you're feeling a little hopeless about our current world and the state of science and research right now. You might not like this if you don't like really science-heavy sci-fi, or if you don't like reading about worlds that are just a little bit too utopian and wholesome. Okay, next on the list is The River Has Roots by Amal El-Mohtar. This was a new release of last year from the same author that wrote This Is How You Lose the Time War, which is one of my favorite sci-fi books of all time. This one, in contrast, is fantasy, and it really leans into that fairy tale atmosphere, which I love. It's about 2 sisters whose family has taken care of these magical willow trees for centuries. This is truly everything I could ask for in a spring, early summer read. The writing is so beautiful and really leans into that fairy tale feeling with very flowery prose. There's also very gorgeous nature descriptions, magical shape-shifting fairy creatures, and of course there's a queer element that was so sweet. It's just all around a good time, and it did make me sob. Normally when I cry from a book, it's just a little tearing up. This one I had tears falling, and I even closed the book at one point and I continued to cry afterwards. Not even because it's that sad, it's just so beautiful, and I also really related to the bond between these sisters. You should read this if you love The Princess Bride or Ella Enchanted or all of those whimsical fairy tale kind of things. And you might not like this if you don't love flowery prose or if you hate whimsy. Okay, this next book I actually rated like 4.5 stars, but I wanted to include it anyway, and I'll explain why. And the book is Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. This is a sci-fi horror about a group of women who are sent on an expedition to Area X, which is a region that's been cut off from the rest of the world for mysterious reasons. 11 expeditions have come before, most ending in tragedy, and now we're seeing the 12th expedition. I really enjoyed this book. It's definitely more literary sci-fi with very small elements of horror, and the atmosphere is probably the best part of this book. It's very mysterious but also very beautiful, and you really don't know what's going on the entire time, but I love books like that. I will say it's kind of slow and uneventful, but the reason I wanted to include it in this list is that I recently watched the movie adaptation and it was so good. It's definitely among the list of my favorite movies of all time now. So the movie gets 5 stars from me even if the book does not. And honestly, after watching the movie, I like the book less. So do with that what you will. The movie is very loosely based on the book. It has the main core elements, but it's a lot more action-packed and definitely more horror than the book, which I absolutely loved. I highly recommend if you want to do both, read the book first and then watch the movie, because I think if I had read it after I watched the movie, the book would have felt so slow and hard to get through. But I still do recommend reading the book. Just read it first. Okay, next is Minor Detail by Adania Shibli, who is a Palestinian author. This book is really interesting because it's split into 2 parts. The first half is a recounting of a true event in which an Israeli commander and his soldiers murder a group of unarmed Palestinians. Then we jump to present day following a young Palestinian woman living under Israeli occupation, and she starts to become obsessed with the story that is described in the first half and kind of goes on a mission to figure out what happened and reconnect to this history. It's so well written, and the parallels between the first and second half were just so cool to see play out. I think definitely read this if you want to get a better idea of what it's like being under Israeli occupation. I'm not even gonna say who wouldn't like this book. I think it's a really important read that everyone should get to at some point. Okay, and last in this category, but maybe my favorite of the whole year, I finally got to The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. This is the first book in the Broken Earth trilogy, and actually as I'm recording this, I'm already on the 3rd book in the series, but this first one, The Fifth Season, is by far my favorite in the series so far. It is a high fantasy, but definitely has a lot of science-y elements to it. We're in a world where every couple hundred years or so, a catastrophic event occurs that makes the land inhospitable. Ash covers everything, making it nearly impossible to grow food. Animals turn into very dangerous and deadly versions of themselves, and war and fighting for territory and just basic living materials is widespread. We also have a group of people called Origines who can sense the vibrations of the earth and either quell or cause earthquakes, and they can also kill people by basically freezing an entire area. And we're mostly following Essen, an Origin and mother who's on a very dangerous journey to get her missing daughter back. I just love this so much, and I already want to reread it as soon as I finish the 3rd book in the series. The structure of this was definitely a little bit confusing at first, but once you figure out what's going on, it is like so genius and mind-blowing, and I have never read anything like this. I love that Essen is a pretty unlikable character, but I still really feel for her, and I love the idea that her love for her daughter is really what's driving all of her decisions, for better or for worse. It's honestly pretty rare to have a female protagonist in a high fantasy book that's not like 18, so I also just really enjoyed that element. I would say you should read this if you loved Gideon the Ninth, or also if you love Brandon Sanderson but want something that's not written by a white Mormon man. Definitely check this out. And you might want to skip this one if you hate being confused or if you can't handle unlikable characters. Okay, now I want to get into some of my favorite nonfiction of the year. This is the first year that I've really consistently gotten into nonfiction, and I'm very glad about that. I've been wanting to get into it for a while now, but this is the year that it really stuck. So let's get into it. After I read Chain Gang All-Stars, I really wanted to continue learning more about the prison industrial complex. So I read Our Prison's Obsolete by Angela Davis. I think this is such a great introduction to prison abolition and why the way that our prisons work is actually making things worse instead of better. We as a country spend billions of dollars on our prison system, and that money could easily be going to better community resources that actually prevent crime in the first place. For how short it was, I think this was really well done and it accomplished what it set out to do. So yeah, I highly recommend if you also want to learn more about the prison system and why it doesn't work. Okay, on a bit of a lighter note, I also read The Serviceberry by Robin Wall Kimmerer, who is probably my favorite author of all time. This is a very bite-sized introduction to the service economy and how we can practice this simple yet radical idea in our own communities. I thought this was beautifully done and very motivational for me to get involved in my own community and start giving back more. I think it's really easy to surround ourselves with the sentiment that capitalism sucks, the world is evil, and there's just nothing we can do about it. But this book really takes a step back and is like, yes, capitalism sucks, but here is what we can do as individuals to actually create the economy that we want and make that change. So yeah, definitely recommend this if you read Braiding Sweetgrass and loved it, or if you just want a nice easy introduction to Kimmerer. Okay, and last but not least is Doppelganger by Naomi Klein. This was so good and it's definitely up there with my favorite nonfiction. It's hard to really describe what this book is about because she really goes in a lot of different directions, but she always brings it back to this idea that the left and the right are not as different as we may think, and we have a lot of similar core beliefs. It's just that on the right, these beliefs and ideas have been twisted and manipulated to turn people against each other. She talks about the pipeline from wellness to full-on anti-vax government conspiracy theorists and so many other pipelines like that, and it's also written in a way that is very fun and keeps you engaged the entire time. So if you're trying to get into nonfiction, I do recommend this one, especially the audiobook is what I did, and I love that a lot. And also if you're wondering how people come to the conclusions of things like anti-vax, I think this book does a really good job of showing where these people came from and how they got to where they are. Okay, so that concludes all of my favorite books of the year. There are definitely so many more books that I read that I really enjoyed, but they just didn't quite make the list. I had such a good reading year. I definitely think I'm getting better at knowing which books I'm going to love before I read them. So a majority of the books I read were 4 or 5 stars. I hope you guys had a great reading year too and are having a really good 2026 so far. I would love to know what your favorite books were of last year and if you're planning on reading any of the books that I mentioned in this video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye!